Let's open the workshop. Goal would be, let's get out of here by, how long do you think this will take you
6
two
o'clock?
guys?
I could be as quick or as slow as you want. Any questions
I think we
people
should
have?
go through the presentation real quick
Yeah.
and then have a discussion afterwards.
Okay.
I mean, I think we got some material here to go through, drawn some conclusions based on what philosophically should happen or could happen.
Yeah,
And there's a spreadsheet here showing some, and I'd like to have just a frank discussion about
yeah, I think that's
what we're
great.
trying to accomplish.
I'm gonna hand it over to you, but
So, and this is a workshop, so no decisions being made, just an open discussion and presentation. I do have this as an agenda item for our next trustee meeting next Wednesday. If there's any action taken, or no action taken, but it is an agenda item
Awesome.
to follow
Thank
up
you.
on this. But this was an issue that, it's been on the back burner for quite a while. It's been brought up at a few trustee meetings, but there was just, so much focus and thought and information in here that it just didn't make sense to make it tabled several times. So that's why we wanted this to happen in a workshop format. So we put together a brief presentation on some strategies for funding infrastructure replacement. I'll just go through this presentation. If there's any questions while doing it, that's fine, or after, doesn't really matter to me. Let me get it going first. All right, just starting off, showing how much pipe we have out there. This is a graphic showing what we have in the ground. We've got 135 miles of pipe. On the left is, you can see the types of pipe we have and the mileage we have. Almost 53 miles of ductile iron, that's the good stuff. Cast iron cement line, that's the old cast iron that has been rehabbed and relined with a cement coating.
Inside.
Inside, yes.
So it still has the old.
It's still the old original cast. It could be upwards of 100 years old, but it's been rehabbed and cement lined so that it's much better than the traditional cast iron line.
Is that what was up on the, by St. Dom's?
Uh,
The
that-
cast iron cement line?
That was cement lined, yes.
Okay.
So that's why that one was not a huge priority. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something that should be.
I just was
replaced
making sure, that's
sometime.
what I thought, because we talked
Yeah.
about it. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, yeah, the Graceland was cement line. The 13 miles of cast, that's that stuff right there. The stuff that's
High
the nasty,
priority.
nasty stuff, the high priority stuff. So we've got about 13 miles of that. Then you can see we've got a variety of other types of materials. Plastic, Bionax, that's what we're replacing the pipe with now. That's the blue PVC, if you will, pipe that we're putting in. About 5.5 miles of that since we've been starting it. There's some other miscellaneous materials. You can also see down here the cast iron pipe that we have in the ground. A little over half of it is 6-inch diameter, which, if we're replacing pipe, we want it to be 8-inch diameter. So not only is it
Gotcha.
in lousy shape, it's also undersized. About 32% of it is 8-inch pipe, which is okay. That's the size we want, but that makes up the bulk of the cast iron that we have too. You can see we have some other sizes. We have some bigger cast iron too, which is not as much of a problem.
And Sid, in that pipe, that's all mineral buildup in there,
Yep.
right?
Yep, iron, sediment deposits. Yep.
Can you break that up? Or what do you do with that? Or
You can do a thing they call ice pigging. It's a process they have where they have these ice shavings and they can force them down through to try to clean them out. But it's labor intensive.
And then the risk is when you take away that, what does it take away for integrity of the pipe?
Yeah.
Is that holding that pipe together?
Right.
And what do you do? What do you do with the customers while you're doing that? It's
Yeah, you're spewing
Crap in the
It's disruptive.
water and everything.
there are companies out there that do it, but we've never. We wanted to have a couple of demonstrations in, but we haven't done it.
That doesn't make any sense. I don't think. It's gotta go.
So the current conditions, as I just kind of went over, we've got 135 miles of water main in our system, 13 miles of unlined cast, 50 miles of line. A few years ago, March of 2020, we put in, as you remember, that 13 2.7% rate increase. So we're currently funded to replace 2 miles a year utilizing cash on hand. We've got a long history of utilizing cash on hand for pipe replacement, which kind of brought up the reason for this presentation. Is that the right thing to do? So at our current rate, we're replacing about 1.5% of our system per year. I've got a slide a little later on, I'll just go over it now, but Tanya did check with a lot of other utilities in Maine, and all the major players are replacing about 1% of pipe. So believe it or not, we are doing a little better than most of the other main utilities out there. I'll go over that a little later.
On a replacement, are they all, is there varying levels of how much old stuff, like do these other,
We're
very similar?
Amazingly, we're all in the same boat, because, you know, just about all the main towns developed at kind of the same time, so they were all using the same materials at the same time. They all grew at the same time, so,
Right.
you know, when everyone was developing their towns, they were putting in cast iron, because that's all there was. They started out with wood, just like we did.
Yeah, right.
Then cast iron, ductile, and most of them are doing some combination of that even now.
And we haven't seen any noticeable, unusual breaks in that cast iron. It's holding up pretty well. Yeah, that's what I was
We don't
thinking.
talk about it, Bob.
Right,
We don't talk about that.
Walk lightly.
So at our current replacement rate, we've got, you know, a little over 13 miles of cast, so it's going to take us, at our current rate of replacement, about 7 years to get rid of all that stuff. We've got almost 50 miles of the cement line, so I've got 30 years. It's probably going to be more like 25 years. At, you know, 2 miles, 2 miles a year doing 50 miles. It's going to take 25 years or so. If we were going to chug along like we are now to get rid of all the stuff in the system. Now, doing this analysis, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. So we're trying to keep it as simple as possible and make some basic assumptions on how we're going to look at this. So for this analysis, we're assuming it costs $100 a foot to replace 2 miles a year, or $500,000 a mile. Now, if you look at our current CIP budget, we haven't budgeted quite that much. We're looking
We're
at
gonna have to,
70.
I think.
What's that?
We're gonna have to. We
Yes.
talked about it. This is
Right.
coming year, we may be looking at going to $1 million budget to do the same thing that 600,000 did last year.
Just by the
That's why we
cost
use-
of inflation.
that's why
Just
we're
the
using $1 million
inflation
as a
of
number.
product and,
Yeah.
materials.
Some
and-
you know, it's hard to say, because on the average, you know, some projects we can do it for sometimes $60 a foot, but some, like 3rd Street, you know, just because of the situation we were in, that blew us out of the water.
Right, it seems the labor,
Yeah.
it
But-
can be labor intensive in some areas, in other areas, it's
One
like
thing to keep
cakewalk.
in mind, that we want to use a number that was the same to compare.
Right.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
tonight's discussion is to compare bonding to cash. So if it's $100 a foot, or
Yeah.
$200 a
Right,
foot, or
right.
$500 a foot, we don't know what it's gonna be. But when we're comparing bonding to cash, we wanna have the same number.
Fair, yeah,
Because this
absolutely.
could be 30% less than we think it is next year.
And one thing that's not pointed out in these bullets as well, one thing I want to mention is in the analyses we're going to show you, we also assumed a 2% per year increase in the overall budget.
Operational costs, right?
Inflational,
Yeah.
just for the,
That's separate from the
Budgeting
capital
purposes.
expenditures, the actual
The rate we're
operational
going, that's best case
salaries and blah, blah,
scenario.
blah, yeah.
and we've also assumed a conservative flat revenue increase. We're assuming that we're not going to have any new customers.
Yep.
And the revenue we're getting now is going to be the revenue we're getting moving forward. So that's just for budgeting purposes, that's a good conservative way to estimate moving forward.
Sid, does this represent the $100, the roughly, I understand, 40% increase in pipe and materials this year due to we'll blame it on the pandemic.
That's what this is assuming. When you say $100 a mile,
Yeah.
and then if we were gonna do it outside, that means that we hadn't got the people here to do all that work. If we doubled our work, we went to 3 miles instead of 2, then we'd have to pay twice as much for an outside company. So that's why the 2nd mile, the 3rd mile is so expensive. Now, for discussion, do we hire more people? Do we rent a piece of equipment? Can we put our own pipe in and save half? Don't know. But for the purposes of this, we're assuming that we're
Then
gonna
that
hire out.
$100 a foot includes all the cost of benefits and everything like
Yep.
that. The full cost of.
Internal.
Yeah, okay.
But we're saying it's double to hire somebody else to do what we're doing in
And
Trenton.
that's historically accurate.
That's according to what I've been told.
Well, we haven't put in 3 miles of pipe a year. If we,
No, anything over 2, so 2 miles. So
2
how much
miles-
does it cost them right now to have somebody else put in the pipe?
Well, we've only had people do certain
if
jobs. We
I
haven't
guess
had
all
to
we're
do-
trying to say now is if we add 1 mile onto what we're doing now, we're not gonna be able to do it all in-house.
Right, we do it so
We're gonna have
that's,
to,
I think
some
That's
of it
goes-
out.
It's kinda like overtime. I mean, all of a sudden the
Well-
cost goes up.
Well, there's a couple of reasons for it. We're gonna be subbing that work out, and even if we did it in-house, we'd have, as you mentioned, we're gonna have to gear up more.
And we might do that if it's
we're gonna
double.
we might be ahead of the city's construction schedule, where we take advantage now of the construction site, we don't have to pay for paving. But if we add more pipe, then we're gonna be into streets that the city is not reconstructing, so we're gonna have to pave the roads. You know, it's just gonna
Okay.
be more.
And that's
more
about,
money.
about 30% roughly of the cost of the job, asphalt paving, ballpark.
It can be
Well,
almost
that's the
half.
same either one.
Can be up to half of that, just for the paving.
So it's imperative that you do it whenever they're reconstructing.
That's the idea,
That's the
that's why we
idea.
do it when the city's rebuilding a road.
yeah.
But
That's why you
is
said
paved.
replace that, that's why I was suggesting we replace it up by
When
St.
it-
Dom's.
whenever we can.
Yeah.
We have pipe in the ground though that eventually, we have done it before. We either reline, not reline it, but, you know, maybe we gotta replace something that has to be done.
That, you know, to your point, that St. Dom's project wasn't the worst thing in the world,
Yeah.
but it wasn't a priority. We had other priorities, you know.
That pipe is
Now it's off the list.
It is. It never was even on our list because
Yeah.
it was a larger, it was a cement line cast. So that probably would have been at the end of our 25 to 30 year program. At that time, it's gonna be time to reconstruct Grace Lawn again.
Yeah, right, right.
And that's probably when we would have replaced that pipe. Not this time, but the next time that they replace it.
Understood.
Same thing happened on Park Avenue. They redid Park Avenue and we didn't replace the water main because it was in good shape. The next time they redo Park Avenue in 20 years, it's gonna be time to replace that pipe too.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
kind of what happened.
So, okay, so you're assuming twice the cost?
Yep,
For,
yep.
okay.
Just for comparison.
Yep,
Now,
just for
Yeah,
comparison.
We'll know by the time budget season comes around, and we'll have a lot of change in the next
Yep,
6 to 8
that's
months.
good, for, these
But
are
right now,
assumptions that
it's-
we're
it's very
making for
expensive.
comparison
Yeah.
purposes,
The
gotcha.
the third bullet point, Tanya and I did a lot of work looking into different kinds of bonds you can get. There are SRF, you know, state revolving loan funds, there are general bond resolutions. And we found, this can go up, it can go down by the time you actually do it. But under the current condition, the general resolution bond is a better deal than the state revolving loan fund bond. And we're assuming over the life of a loan that we're going to incur a 6.1% interest fee, payback over the life of the loan. The current interest rate that we checked a few months ago on a general resolution bond was only 1%. But by the time you amortize that and pay it over 10 years, if you have a $100,000 bond.
And they're 20-year notes, right?
60 grand.
They can be 10 or 20. So that's just keep that in mind for the assumptions we're making here. Try to keep it consistent.
A 10-year loan might be better, so we can pay it off in 10, and then if we need to move beyond that, then we can do
Well,
whatever.
Right, interest rate.
Actually, better to do 20.
What was that?
Now, see, here's,
I
I think
I
it's
really
20.
think because rates are gonna go crazy someday.
Yeah.
Maybe not in 2 years or 3 years, but eventually, we're gonna see rates go crazy. If we have a 20-year, and the pipe will last 50 years, so we can borrow 20 for 20 years and be okay.
But you can also refi too.
And you can also refi, but 20 years.
So
is
$1
better
million
'cause
bucks costs us $86,000 a year.
I figure 90,000 a million.
Okay,
That's what I've always figured,
All
it's
right.
an easy number, it was a 90,000 a million.
that's pretty close,
Yeah.
close enough for government work.
Yeah.
So thinking about how we're gonna look at this, you know, the questions we should ask ourselves. Number one, do we want to accelerate our pipe replacement schedule? Are we happy with 2 miles a year? Do we wanna go to 3? You know, that's a key question. What do we wanna do?
Is 1 to 1.5%, is that pretty much industry standard? I mean,
It is, it's not great, but it is.
And that's
It
why
kind of
there's
is.
a huge
Everyone,
problem.
everyone's in the same boat. I mean, you
Yeah.
look at you look at the American Water Works Association report card, what's the problem? In 9 out of 10 years that they did their survey, and I'll have that in your packet, everyone responded to it, said that their biggest problem is replacing infrastructure, because it's
That's why
expensive.
right now it's a huge problem nationally. Now, we're really lucky compared to other water companies, but there's billions of dollars available to water companies in this country due to the stimulus.
Well,
Because they're in
that was
such
my other
bad
question.
shape.
Is there-
We'd be better off being
are there any
horrible
monies
shape.
to be had
Probably get all
there?
kinds of money.
I could ask
That's
that
all,
one.
it's all
Okay, so.
jumping way ahead.
But again, it's
Well, it's a-
pitiful.
yes.
1.5% is pitiful.
Does it make
Every 100
sense?
years a pipe gets replaced?
You know, does it make sense to continue to fund our pipe replacement utilizing cash on hand, as we're doing now? Should we bond for the cost of pipe replacement? Should we have a combination of the two? Those are kind of the key questions we have as we look at this. Now, I'm gonna whiz through this because it's just a lot of stuff, but, you know, if you're bonding versus cash on hand, just pointing out some of the advantages and disadvantages of doing both. Some of the advantages of bonding it: we are a quasi-municipal organization, so we can take advantage of the main municipal bond bank, and you can get lower rates than you can normally on the open market. If you need money, you can raise it quickly. If you need $1 million, you've got $1 million. And it does enable us to keep cash on hand, so you can spread the payments over an extended period, typically 10 years, as you mentioned, sometimes 20.
Depending on
Some of the disadvantages of bonding: despite the low rate, there is an interest rate to pay for that, and there are administrative fees as well. If you take all of our bonds, our current bond schedule we have now, that's always included in your annual budget, you will see that we're paying about 21% of our bonds that we've taken out are paid, you know, that 21% of that total that we're paying back is interest and admin fees, because those admin fees add up.
And we won't do that going forward with this.
That's not 21% a year.
We have been in the past, because we've gone to
21%
municipal.
rate?
Total.
No, it means at the end of, if you borrow $1 million, at the end of 10 years, you pay back $1,200,000.
Yep.
That's the 21%.
Right,
Which is not 21% a year, because if you
correct.
did that, you'd
Correct.
be paying back
Over the life
$3
of the
million.
bond.
But none of them are like that, 6%. Well, yeah, you're right, that's right, it's not amortized.
It's
So
not an
it's not
annual
21%
interest, it's not.
Annually, it's 20%.
It's a gross
Yeah. So we have to figure
total
what made the most
premium
sense.
that you pay on a loan at the end.
For
It's
the
like when
total
you
loan.
buy your house and a 30-year mortgage, you're paying twice what you paid for the house.
Yeah.
One issue, you know, we're limited to the size of the bond we can take, because you have to spend it in a certain period. We can't simply, it wouldn't work for us to take out a $20 million bond to replace pipe, because we're limited by the amount of work we could, you know, how quickly we could spend that. So that's a limitation on.
What are the penalties for not that, I guess, don't even call it.
Well,
Because we wouldn't, I mean, that's not something we would encounter.
The bond bank watches what you're doing. I'm not sure what happened if you're not, I don't know what the penalties are if you don't spend it.
If you took it stuck in the bank.
They may not let you borrow more,
Yeah.
they may limit how much you can borrow.
Our goal isn't to do that, so it's a moot point.
One administrative issue, or a couple, you know, by our charter, as you know, we have to get City of Auburn approval if we want to issue a bond. That's one issue of getting bonds. And last but not least, it does require significant staff time. You do need to hire bond counsel. It is a process. There's an advertising process. It's work to take out a bond. Not to say we can't, but
Yep.
just be familiar with it. Some of the advantages on the flip side: advantages of funding pipe, utilizing cash on hand. You're not issuing any long-term debt, obviously. Money is used directly for the project as opposed to paying interest and fees. In 2020, we paid on our outstanding bonds that we have right now, we paid $135,000 in interest and admin fees for our existing bonds. If no new bonds are issued, we'll be debt-free in 2034. We do have a long history of bonding for one-time expenditures that come up. We haven't had any significant ones for a bit, and if we don't have any moving forward, of course, there's no way of knowing that. But if we do issue no new bonds, we will be debt-free in 2034. Rates can be adjusted down if revenue outpaces capital need. Not to say that's likely, but that is an option if that should happen. But that's not so with bonds. Once you issue the bond, you're on a payment schedule, and you will be paying those bonds back. Some of the disadvantages of funding pipe replacement utilizing cash on hand. In order to increase funds for pipe replacement, you have to put in a new rate, and that's not immediate money you have. You have to wait until you've accumulated enough revenue from that rate increase to use it. So it might take 1 or more years to build up enough reserve to use it for what you want it for. Current ratepayers would be funding long-term projects. Short-term water customers may not enjoy the benefit of their investment. You know, you got someone here that's renting an apartment. They're paying a high water rate. They move out next year. They're not gonna realize their increased water bill for what they paid for. You can't increase rates to build up capital reserve. One thing we're not allowed to do is increase rates over a number of years and just put it in the bank and put it in a reserve fund for future pipe replacement. That's a no-no.
That would be like if sewer did it for the overflow tank in Lewis.
Right, we can't do that.
Can't do that.
No. One thing we can't do also is implement an effective infrastructure surcharge program. You might know from the last time I went through this, there is an infrastructure surcharge that you can establish where you have incremental rates each year that you just increase your rates without having to go through the extensive PUC review process. However, that has to be funded through depreciation of your assets, and the only way to depreciate your asset would be if there's a large one-time capital expenditure, like if you did take out a big bond and you depreciate that asset, you can take that depreciation and increase your rates by that amount. But if you're doing it through cash, there's nothing, you can't get enough depreciated asset to make that increase work. So that's a disadvantage of utilizing cash. This just shows the current bond schedule that we're on. I mentioned before that we're going to be debt-free in 2035. You can see this year, at the end of this year, we have a bond payment. Next year, we're going to be dropping $267,000 out of our bonded debt, which is good. You can see how that continues to go down, 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 and then in 14 years, at our current pace, we won't have any more bonded debt. So
instead of, if you bonded net now, you're looking at 20 years from now. If we took a 20-year bond out, so you'd be, instead of 2034, you'd be 2041 or 42.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
The most recent bond we took out was for the Allen treatment we did in 2019.
And I think that it all goes, the idea though is, are we okay at 2034 if we've still got 40 miles of pipe in the ground that's falling apart? Yeah, we're debt free, but we also have 40 miles of pipe in the ground that is in real bad shape.
To me, just like you
I don't know,
said,
I don't want to go to
taking-
debt. Nobody wants to go to debt.
Taking, 80 to 100 years to replace your whole system just seems crazy. Whether or not everyone else is doing it or not,
Right.
we can be proactive and do better.
Yep. It's a matter of choices, how you do it.
Right.
That's
the reason we're having, is to
That's right.
evaluate what
So what we've got here is, we've got 6 different scenarios. I'm not going to dwell horribly on them because you'll fall asleep, but I do have 6 different scenarios here to look at. The first one is just what we're doing now. We are currently replacing pipe at 2 miles a year. We're utilizing cash on hand. We're going to look at what our future looks like doing that. How is that going to impact our budget? Scenarios 2 and 3 are what I call the Steve Milks scenarios. One thing you had asked me to look at, number 2 is bonding to fund all pipe replacement at the current rate, so putting in just 2 miles a year.
Yep.
And just taking out a bond, a 1-year bond to
To do
replace
the 2
pipe
miles.
and keep our cash on hand. So we're gonna see what that does. We're gonna look, scenario 3 is doing the same thing, bonding to fund all of our pipe replacement at the current rate, but doing it for 2 years. 2 $1 million bonds, one this year, one next year. What does that do? Scenario 4, we're going to increase pipe replacement to 3 miles a year. Instead of doing 2 miles, we're gonna increase it to 3 miles. And we're gonna do it all through cash on hand. What does that do to our rates if we wanna increase our cash in order to put in 3 miles of pipe? Scenario 5 is a combination of the two. We're gonna try to see how we can increase pipe from 2 miles to 3 miles. We're gonna use a combination of cash on hand for 2 miles and then bonding that additional mile. $1 million. Remember, it's gonna cost another $1 million a year to put that extra mile in. So we're looking at bonding that extra mile for, until the cast iron's been eliminated. Scenario 6 is increasing pipe replacement to 3 miles a year, but not using any cash, just doing it all through taking out bonds until the cast iron's been eliminated. What does that do to our
And
rates?
there's
What does it
13
do to our
miles,
cash?
so that would be 3 times, so that's basically
Yep,
4
6.
years.
Well, if we,
No,
if we
13
focused
miles.
on that only, for that amount of time. I don't know that we can, because we have other priorities.
Yeah.
Streets that open up.
Yeah, you're right,
opportunities.
you're right, you're
I don't
right.
think we can take our full $2 million budget and put it towards these priority pipes.
I'm gonna,
Otherwise, we could make things a lot easier
Yeah.
if we could do that.
I think now it's time to pass this out. I apologize for this, but you wouldn't see it otherwise. But
When I saw this for the first time, I.
What is
happy
this?
that-
this kind of, these scenarios I'm gonna be going through, this puts them side by side and shows all of the outer years.
We'll just put one across right here.
I'll give you both one, because it's, okay, I'll give you both ones, so you can see it. You're gonna be looking at it sideways and that's gonna break.
Oh, my arms aren't long enough.
Mike, you want one? Jen, you've seen this.
I have it. I have my
Oh,
copy.
wow.
So I think we got this all mixed up though, because scenario number 5 on the chart here is hybrid. But on here, it's saying the hybrid is scenario 4. So something got.
Oh, the numbers, yeah, there's 6 here, but the numbers got skewed,
Right.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, so
Yeah.
actually that's
Yeah,
6.
yeah,
So
yeah.
Right, yeah.
one is, the first one is
Yeah.
1, 2, 3,
You're
4,
correct.
5,
This is
6.
1, this is 2,
Yeah,
this
gotcha.
is 3,
Yeah, you are correct.
So the bottom one
This
is
is
scenario
4.
6.
this is 5. Yeah, and scenario 6 is the one,
All
okay.
right, so here we go. Scenario 1, again, that is replacing, just what we're doing now, replacing 2 miles utilizing cash on hand. Now, again, remember, we're assuming $100 a foot. Right now, we're not budgeting quite that much, but for this scenario, we're assuming we're gonna have to budget
Yep,
$100 a foot.
we got the assumptions,
So
so.
we're gonna
yeah,
have
we don't
to-
keep.
So we're gonna have an annual revenue increase of $400,000. So to keep on doing what we're doing, we're going to need a 5% rate increase every 5 years.
And that healthy level is $1 million in the bank at
Yep,
the
that's
beginning
gonna
of,
keep-
at the
that's-
beginning of every fiscal year,
Well-
correct? Thereabouts.
Yeah, hovering around there.
That's
Or
gonna keep
everyone's
us from
below.
bumping up against the 100 days of cash on hand. So
Right,
that would
that's-
keep us healthy.
The 100 days cash on hand is how much?
600,
600, okay.
And it looks like primarily with a 2% increase, because we talked about operational expenses, then half of this increase will go to operations, and according
True.
to what they're saying, only half of it would be needed for cash flow. I'm not sure if I agree with that. After 10 years, only 2% increases would keep the cash flow under control for 10 years, but that's what they're saying.
that's the assumption we made. And remember from the initial.
Yeah, that's right, the
2%.
We're not doing anything more than the 2 miles, so we're not increasing anything, we're in status quo.
Yeah, right.
We're leaving that crappy pipe in the ground, we're not
Yep,
really getting to it
understand,
for
understand, yep.
1.5% a year.
All right, so that's kind of what we're doing now, that's.
What's our ballpark revenue that would be affected by the rate increase? Ballpark, are we talking a yearly revenue?
Yearly revenue is around 3.6.
Million?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking 3.6 million, so we need to 5% of that, right?
150, 160,000.
180. 180,000,
That's saying every 5 years, we
Every
need
5 years.
180,000 more to fund both
yeah.
a 2% increase in operational costs and the keep the cash flow in place.
Right, okay.
The scenario 2, just taking out a one-time bond, funding that and not taking any, not utilizing cash for 1 year. So, taking out a one-time $1 million bond next year, so the total interest we paid over the life of that bond is gonna be, remember the 6.1%?
Per year, hold on.
61, right, so over the life of it, if it's a 10-year bond, it's gonna be 61 grand.
Per
Over the
year.
life of the bond,
It's 610,000.
Plus payback, so it's around
total, no,
90,000
total over the
service.
life of the bond, 6.1% of $1 million.
Right, but we gotta pay back.
That's all at the end, we're only
No,
paying.
no,
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 no, that's just the interest, now we gotta pay
Interest.
back.
Yeah.
So that's where the
Interest, not the
90,000
principal.
comes in to, out of
Hold
cash,
on,
we
the
gotta pay
interest
back.
paid over the life of the bond. That
Over
our
a $1
net
million
interest.
bond?
Well, I don't know, it's
That's
not
not
really,
right.
that's not right either, because it's gotta
No, it'd
be,
be
No,
$600.
it's a yearly payout, so.
I'm just saying over the life of the whole, the pay, after 10 years of paying off that bond,
but in
you
5
paid
years, we're
That's
61
not
grand
right.
in interest. Huh?
That's, there's no
It'd be
way.
like 610,000.
Yeah,
Look
it's
high enough.
6.1% per
No.
year. Because it's 21% is the total
So the
payout.
first year it's 61,000 for interest, but as we pay it off at year 5, it's only 30,000.
Oh, yeah.
So
But-
I don't know that it's 61,000, because at year 5, we're now only paying 30,000, because we don't owe as much.
We should have, we'd have an
You'd
amortization
have to have an
schedule.
amortization
We did,
So
we
we
printed
know
them
what
off from the bond bank, we
Yeah.
did.
Right.
Or you, the bond
But I'm
bank has
saying that-
amortizations right
But
on
year
it.
1, we're gonna pay 61,000.
No, I'd have the, you want me to go grab the amortization?
So we're getting like a 1%
It's
total?
1%.
Yes.
1%.
Total with all fees and everything?
I have the schedules on my desk, if you
Like
wanna see
there's-
them.
Holy
Not much
smokes,
money at all.
bonded.
Yeah, right, it's like that's a question answered, it's like a
It's
no-brainer.
about 90,000, $1 million for to service it and pay the interest and everything else. That's really what we're concerned about, because we gotta pay it back. So even though we're paying interest, next year we gotta be making interest and principal payments on the
But
loan.
1%, but that's a
But
1%
still,
loan.
it's, yes, that's right, that's why it's so cheap right now.
Right.
So with this one, remember, this
That's
is
like free
a,
money.
so this is a one, you know,
One-time thing.
bond at 1 year, you don't increase the pipe, you just keep your cash on hand.
Yeah.
So that's what you get. We revert back to cash on hand the year after that.
And
And
we know
if we
it's
did
no
that,
increase- no
that'd be-
increase until 2041.
And that wouldn't be, that would not require a rate increase. Absorbing that would not bump you up against your cash on hand being a problem. So that's something we could do.
What is, the bonds that you have out right now, what are they at percentage-wise?
There's a combination of, there's a
I know, you have
whole,
one,
there's a dozen of them. But if you just, I'm just trying to keep it simple. If you add up all of those bonds in aggregate, by the time they're paid off, it's about 20% in interest and admin fees that you're paying above and beyond the amount you took out. I could show you, in our budget, I could show you the bond payment schedule we have. We've got it in one spreadsheet as part of our annual
To me,
budget.
it's just this.
Right,
that's
there's a thing
cheap.
there's a thing in finance called future value of money. Present value of future cash. There's two different
Yeah.
things. That's free money. You're getting money it's worth more
Well,
today than it
especially-
is in the
especially
future,
if,
and it's
10
below
years-
interest, it's below inflation.
Plus that 5 years from now, interest rates go to 3, 4, 5% in the same bond bank. Because it's coming, I'm sorry, inflation, what follows, the next thing is increased interest rates.
So,
So
anyway,
Sorry.
this scenario,
Yeah.
the next scenario is the same thing, only doing it for 2 years instead of 1, okay? So you're taking out $1 million bond next year, $1 million bond the next year too. So you get 2 years of replacing pipe with bonds and keeping your cash on hand. So quite simply, that is what you'd be paying
And that puts off,
interest over the life of the bond,
So
And
what's
these
our
are
cash
20
on
these are
hand?
20-year bonds?
10.
10-year bonds.
so we could actually stretch it to 20 and make this even better. But 14,000, a 14% increase by 20, according to the chart here, we wouldn't need any increase in the rates until 2040. But
Yeah.
we're still staying at the 2 miles. So, to Steve's point, the injection of cash is helping us control our rate increases, for sure. But it still doesn't do anything about infrastructure.
Right.
But it is.
You're not accelerating any
You're not accelerating anything, but you are, looks like you are improving. And what I liked about the bonding was, we had time to think about it. We have a good 3 or 4 years before that rate increase to decide what we need and to prepare for it. And maybe we go up 5, 5, and 5 the 6 years before that, and not go up 14% in 1 year. We go up 2% and
Yeah.
2%. We have time to think. We don't have this, we gotta go up next year because we're gonna run out of cash. Oh, Jesus, now we're panicking, we gotta go up 50%.
One reason for looking at this scenario too, look at the outlying years of scenarios, well, actually 2 and 3. You're good for a long time, but it catches up with you with no periodic rate increases. That's something to consider as well.
All right, so then we had scenario, that was number 3, which is
Yeah.
1, 2,
So
3.
scenario 4, that's increasing pipe to 3 miles, utilizing only cash on hand, okay? So you need to raise an additional $1 million a year in order to do that through rate increases.
So we have
If we were gonna do that, we need a 15% rate increase right off the bat, and you need a 2% annual rate increase every year for 4 years.
Which is not 8%, that's more like 10, because you're raising
You're
2% of a
compounding.
higher number, so it's more like 12, so it's a 15%.
All right, so
And
the
then-
next one, yeah, got it.
So, and under this scenario, I'm assuming that, once we've done that for the 5 years, we're reverting back to 2 miles a year. If you did that, and I just put that in there to keep it consistent with the other bonding scenarios, because once you've expended your bond, you can't keep your increase in pipe going perpetually.
Right.
After
So-
5 years, you would have the opportunity, in theory, to reduce rates or continue with modest increases and keep it going.
Okay. And then the last one?
The last scenario was using only bonds for the next 5 years to, no, I'm sorry, this one, this one was the combination of cash on hand and bonds. So you'd be taking out a $1 million bond for 5 consecutive years. If you're doing that, you're gonna need a 7.2% rate increase. The first one you'll need is gonna be in
Because
2027.
you're doing a combination, you're expelling your cash and you're borrowing.
You'll need a 5.6% rate increase the following year. The total interest payback over the life of the bonds is $305,000. And again, once you're done, you're reverting back to replacing 2 miles a year in 5 years.
So the
last-
final scenario,
The final scenario is increasing pipe replacement to 3 miles a year using bonds only. So you'd be taking out a $2 million bond for 5 subsequent years. You need a 22% rate increase in 2026, a 5.9 in 2027.
I don't see that on this
What
chart.
are we talking?
I don't see that on this chart,
Yeah.
22%
No.
increase in 2026. I don't
That's
see
not
that
The
on
last,
this chart.
is that not updated? Whoops, where am I?
Then another
Why would we
increase in
need a
2027.
22%
Whoops.
rate increase? That doesn't make any sense.
I think with your chart here is more reasonable, and I have some numbers I want to.
And if we're gonna do 3 miles of pipe and we're gonna bond it, why are we not bonding $3 million in year one?
Well, because it's 1 million for the first 2 miles in-house, and then another
Is that
million
not
for the
updated
third
too?
mile. Now, can we do it for less by hiring some people? But for purposes of comparison, we're saying it costs $1 million
I thought
to
that
do
2
last
million one
mile.
did have a big increase.
But, so then it would be 4 million.
It'll be 2 million, 1 million for the first 2 miles, and another million for the third mile.
Oh, okay. 3 miles is 2 million.
Right,
Okay.
first 2 miles.
Just because we don't have enough staff on.
Right now, we don't have enough
Just
staff to
just
add
taking
more,
on so
right.
much more.
Now, could we hire
Managing 3
2 or 3
miles is a
construction
big problem,
guys?
it's a big task. Yeah.
Could we hire a crew that's their only job, 8 months of the year to replace pipe? I don't know. That's
And
for
does
$1 million
hiring
a year.
a contractor that could do it, same.
Even
Lawrence
hiring a
or-
contractor just takes that much more
What was
work.
that
We gotta
experience
manage
in?
temporaries, we gotta
Try to-
manage the project, it just costs more to do more. It really
Fair
does.
enough. I can accept that. So
I'd have
it's
to
2
look at the
million to
spreadsheet.
replace 3 miles and
And we'd have $1 million out of cash, and
Want me to go grab it,
in this
Sid?
scenario, we're bonding the
yeah,
first.
so we'd
Or
spend no
million do
cash.
too.
We spend no cash.
Pull it up real quick.
So now, I wanna
Yeah,
show
there's,
So-
there's a disparity here between that
So-
chart
Let me go grab it.
How much cash, so if we end up at the end of the, how much cash did we end up, do we have
Well-
now? And we're gonna end up with at the end of this year, roughly.
What I wanted to do is.
Well,
use-
Well, this isn't right.
I wanted to use.
That last scenario, these rate increases, that there's a disparity in that.
But there's no
Slide.
cash, I don't see any cash totals on here.
I have down here at end of year 7, we have $3.3 million left on hand after supporting all the bond payments up to the 7th year.
In what year?
The way these charts are set up,
That's a lot.
At the end of the 7th year, we have $3.2 million on hand
Which is
still.
2029,
Our
on
capital-
scenario 6.
Right.
the way these are set up, the rate increases come in when we're at the point where we do need to have more cash on hand for operations. That's where you see these.
Right, but if 7
Right,
years.
that was-
that-
But you could, right, so you, instead of a 26% rate hike, you would anticipate you probably step
Well,
it.
this year's
Well,
more
I
like-
don't know about this, there was a discrepancy in this.
So,
between that. I want
if we
to see
bond-
teams getting that.
We bond these, we're doing 5 bonds is what we're, in
Well,
scenario
we'll
6.
be doing more depending on how it went. I mean, we used a 5-year, I used a 5-year plan just to give you an idea.
Right,
And I
and
have
in
it
this
down here.
scenario, at the end, assuming the interest rates stayed the same, I mean, I would think whether we
We would owe
bond.
$10 million at the end of the, well, actually, we'd owe more than that. We would owe a little less than that, because year 1, we borrow the money, but we really wouldn't have to pay it back until the 2nd year.
But we don't know what the interest rates are out here either.
Right,
We're just in the outlying years now.
We don't.
right,
Could-
so
they
we
could be
might
going
get the
up
end of
and,
year
you
1.
know,
Yeah.
So if we bond year 1, the $2 million, we're not gonna spend the $2 million. We're gonna do,
Well, let me show you what I got.
yeah, do you have a cash?
Yeah.
If we bond you're almost gonna spend it. If you're gonna do 3 miles, it's.
No, I'm saying we're not gonna spend that in cash though.
Right.
No.
Right.
See, if we
So
borrow,
that cash stays in the,
if we borrow the whole money, we have $1 million left over in year 1. We haven't spent it, so it's still in the bank.
correct.
Year 2, we have another $1 million coming in, because every year we're budgeting $1 million. Now we have $2 million minus the debt service on $2
Of
million, which is
90,000.
So we have $1.8 million left on hand at the end of year 2.
Yep,
Year 3, we borrow another $1 million, but we also get $1 million from our budget. So now we have $2.8 million left over, because we've added
Yeah.
another $1 million, but we spent $360 for debt service. Now we have $2.4 million. At the end of year 4, we had $2.4 million still in the bank,
yep,
but we do owe $6 million, because we've had 3 years
Right.
worth of bonding. At the end of year 4, we get another $1 million out of cash, look at the kitty, but we also get $1 million that we have to borrow. So now we have $3.4 million, but we have a debt service of $540,000. So at the end of year 5, we have $2.9 million left over.
and 540 in debt service.
But we owe $8 million, and it's $540 to service that debt every year. But again,
And
at the
5
end-
years
At the end
left.
of year 5, we go to $3.9 million on hand, because we had another $1 million for budget, but we have a $720,000 per year cost bonding. We now have $3.2 million on hand at the end of year 5. So the way I've got paying those, at the end of year 7, we owe $14 million if we went that far, but we have $3.2 million left on hand. So we haven't had to have a rate increase at all.
No.
For 7 years, I mean, because we got $3.2 million on hand, but we know our debt service is $1 million a year now. So
And it-
do we plan on 3 years? We got
But
3
that's,
years to think
is that a
about how do we
10-year?
adjust our
Are those
rates.
10-year or 20-year bonds?
I would, 90,000 is a 10-year bond. You could probably go with a 20 and save
Isn't
money.
that when I did it, that was a 20-year bond, it was 90,000.
Yeah, okay, maybe is that what it is, a 20-year bond, 90,000?
I know, I never
I
even.
can't-
Did you have that payout schedule or not?
So,
for that-
at
for
the end
this
of year
scenario?
7, again,
Yeah,
if we went
I-
that far.
Didn't have the 22% rate increase.
On a-
Oh,
The first rate increase.
On a $1
was-
million
So this
loan
one was
at
accurate.
6.1%
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
for 20 years is $86,000 a
Okay, so
year.
then this is a 20-year loan. So this is 90,000.
If 6.1% is the interest rate,
Yeah.
which
So
I'm still
again,
not convinced
my
that
point
that's
is
what
that we wouldn't have to
what
worry
we're-
about any rate increases for 7 years, and then we gotta start looking at debt service.
It's 1%.
And how much is the average rate
We
increase?
we are talking a completely different language, I think.
Holy smokes. I mean,
What did
that's-
that 15% increase get to gain us in actual revenue, additional revenue? When we went to 15?
$1 million.
$1 million. So technically, at the end of year 7, we would have to go up 15% to service the debt of 14 million. And at the end of 7 years, we would probably have to look at increasing rates. Now, maybe we can go up a couple of times, 5% here, 5% there, but we have control over it.
But we've got cash on hand. We've got
But
a
we've
lot
got
of cash on
3.2
hand.
million on hand.
So we could
that was
use
3
that
years
to
worth of-
service the debt for the next,
Well, we could, but, yeah.
because the operations are gonna be kicking in cash.
Right,
that-
you'd have time to think about what the rate increase needs to be to service the debt. In the meantime, you have 3 years worth of cash on hand to service the debt,
Right,
while you're thinking about what you should do.
Right.
But that's only doing 14 miles of,
That's why you don't like to have rate increases every year, because every year you
so
have
that's
to
the
file with the
disadvantage.
PUC, you have to
If you
put
keep
hearings.
going, you wanna get 20
I've
miles.
got it, I need to get clarified, and I'd like to see, because I don't understand the 6.1%.
All right, let me go grab it. I get those.
Yeah, good point.
Is it at the end and the total payout, or is it an
All we're saying
annual?
is over the life of.
So,
the
but
loan
that's a
paid off.
different 6 point, I mean, that's why I'm saying, you had 21% on the other, that's not an interest rate. That's,
No, it's not, it's.
but you're
the
saying
it's the-
interest
Well, not-
paid.
It's the interest paid over the life of the loan.
Which,
It's not an annual payment,
That's
it's
so
once you.
cheap. You understand how cheap that is,
No,
right?
but, and that's fine, but that's just what it is. That's what you pay in interest over the life of the loan, after the loan's all paid
So
off.
they're gonna loan us money for 1%.
10% of $1 million is $100,000, so 6% is 61,000. So,
Right, but they're loaning us money at 1%. Interest rate, yearly APR,
right. And then
annual interest rate.
Then we're paying all the fees and administrative fees and all
So
that, to bring it up
how
to
much,
6.
What's
would we be looking at taking out? I mean, I
Again,
can pull it up on
I'm trying to get to a real number. How much, what percent per year is the money going to cost us? With the fees, with
Terry's
everything.
bringing back the bonds.
I don't care what the interest rate is. I want to know what per year is our actual rate that the money is costing us. With, it's all, it doesn't matter whether they call it a fee or an interest rate.
Right, it's still, it's, yeah.
Like if I buy a car and they say it's a 2% interest rate, but we're gonna charge you a fee on top of that, then it's not 2%, it's 5%,
Right.
or 6%, or whatever. Like,
That's where the 6 comes in. Because the bond comes.
so the interest rate's 5.5% on this.
That's with, what is that, with the bond council figured in and all the expenses? to
No,
deliver
that's, it's point,
0.5.
yes.
And then the fees?
Those are calculated into the interest payments.
So
You know,
year one,
year one, you're paying,
where our rate is only this, so we're paying on 100,000, it says it's 0.55%,
Mhm.
but we're paying $4,600 in interest on 100,000. That's 4.6%.
because that includes the fees, the admin fees of the bond bank.
So it's less than the 5.4 you're saying here, right?
But then it says first year total 109,000. Total
That's-
payments,
That's principal and interest.
Right, we have to service the debt.
so, can you help me with this? Explain
Okay,
this to me.
so if you have.
We borrow
I think I
100,000.
understand it, but
He's just
I'm gonna
looking
pull
at
up an
the dollars
amortization
there.
study.
We borrow a million, we borrow 100,000. The interest rate says this, but our interest doesn't calculate. Thus, that's an interest rate. It's not 0.55%, that's 5 point, to $4,600 interest. It doesn't calculate.
Principal rate, 5%. Yeah, that would be $5,500 is what.
Well, if it's not percent, that would be, 0.55% would be $500, $50.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Right.
But this says 4,863. And
Because
then
you
it's
have, you pay a lot of
coming here.
admin fees.
But that
Is that
says
what the
interest.
current one with
How much
maintenance
admin
is,
fees?
or what we're looking at?
But then it
going on
says
here?
total
This is general
payments,
resolution.
104,000, then first year total is 109,000. So I don't know how all these numbers add up.
I think when it comes to bonding, that the bond companies that actually do this make a lot more money than the actual fee. Just like when a bank, you know, they might have an interest rate that.
But they have
here's
to
the
tell you
prime
what they're
rate.
charging you.
Right, and I think they are there.
They're
So
not.
how many, so we're talking
This is
about, is this a
Just to
10-year,
rough, get an idea of what
is this
you're
a
gonna be paying
10-year
back.
schedule? Yep. No,
Yeah.
20-year.
10.
Okay, yeah, 10. So 10 years. interest rate of 1%.
Because if we borrow 100,000, and at the end of the first year, we pay 109,000.
So the total,
That's 9%.
the total interest at 1%. Total interest paid
Well, if that's including.
is $5,100. $5,100 on a 10-year
Right, but if
That's
that's.
the total,
total.
at the end of the 10 years,
Mhm.
$5,100, which would be at 10, it's $500, $510 a year. So,
Why is this? Well, they're talking about.
so I'm not
Okay, so
understanding
these
how
are separate. Okay, so this is a bond, 100,000 this year, 100,000 each year, not.
Yeah.
That's why it's amortized differently.
But I'm not understanding how we get this total right here, 109,000,
Is that with
510.
is that with the principal payments?
Principal and interest.
So you're not only paying interest rate, but you're also paying principal payments. You gotta pay it back. So if it's a.
It's the principal payment that
Right,
you're paying.
that's why we're
So
saying
at the end of year
86 or
2, you're not gonna owe the 100,000, you're
Right.
gonna owe the 94, 90,
Right.
95.
And I learned that from the city, when I went up to 90,000 per million, that's what we've been paying a long time in the city, the average around 90,000 per million, including paying back, not just interest, the whole nut.
So, our actual interest rate, our cost of money, it's not interest
It's
rate,
around, I think it's 4 or 5%.
5%,
5%.
yeah,
And it looks like we're talking
4.6%.
6, I mean, the whole idea is what's it gonna be when we actually go to get the loan, is it gonna always be different, there'll be a little bit of percentage change.
So it's
What's
6,
going on?
it's about a 5%
And who knows?
cost of money to the district
Over the
per
life of the
year,
loan.
Over the life of the loan, yeah.
per year.
Right, per year, but it's amortized based on what you owe, so you have to, it's
Yeah,
not
so
a
it's
full
gonna-
5% of a million all year long, because you're
Right.
making payments.
Right,
Unless
right, right.
Which
sometimes
is
you make
still
one
cheap.
payment a year, right?
It's still cheap, all right, I'm
So-
just trying, so the cost of money is 5% a year on principal.
And what we usually do is make one payment a year, so
Right.
it is a full year of interest, but then next year it's a little lower because we're paying interest on a lower amount, we owe less. So at the end of 10 years, it's half, the actual interest should be half, but we're still making the same principal payment, so that's how we can accelerate it quicker. That's the magic of amortization.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That's $120,000 a year would be our payments.
Yeah,
On
and
on $1 million for 10 years.
Well, I had well, for 10 years, yeah, I had 90,000, but I think 20 years is more reasonable. I don't know that we need to go with 10 for something that's gonna last 50. I've always believed that we can borrow for a longer period of time for something that's gonna last a long time.
What is the life of the new style pipe you're putting in? Is there an estimate of what?
Well, if you compare it, it's a PVC plastic product, and if you compare that to sewer pipe, which is a PVC product, that's been in the ground since probably early 70s, late 60s, and that stuff has not shown any signs of deterioration at all.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's kind of a wild card, you know, saying how long a pipe is gonna last in the ground, but, you know. a
I didn't know if the
PVC
manufacturer had an
Well-
estimate of what.
They can say whatever they want, but the
Yeah, they
proof's
can.
gonna be in the pudding, and I don't know if it's gonna be 100 years. I mean,
Some claim that.
Yeah,
And the pipe is substantial, it's about half an inch thick.
it's a different it's a different type of PVC than a sewer pipe. It's manufactured differently.
Okay.
It's more resilient than a sewer pipe. But I'm not gonna put a stamp on it.
So,
It's-
I guess I want to get back to the original discussion, because when it said here that we would have to have it there, it said 22%.
Yeah, this schedule here is the one.
All right, so that means that.
Those are the rate increases that you need to take that bond out,
7.
not
So year 7,
be
just like I said,
up against,
year
2029.
8, we're looking at maybe an 11%. So in that 3-year period, we have to decide before we get there what the rate increases are going to look like to support the bond payments that we have accumulated.
I think that the one I had up here was based on some earlier figures. I apologize, it did not
Yeah.
match this last scenario.
So,
If we're gonna move this along though, you know, we've got, these are the outfits we did check with, you know, Bangor, Kennebunk, I always stumble on this one. Kennebunk, Fort Wells, Bath, Augusta, Yarmouth. You know, Two of them heard back from, 1% pipe replacement is what they schedule, and most of the others are the same. Most of them do use a combination of bonds and cash. They do a little bit of both. Augusta did say they ideally would like to have their rates in place to sufficiently cover pipe replacement. But all of them sort of do a little bit of different. They have combinations of them. Some of them are trying to put in that infrastructure surcharge that we mentioned. It's a bit all over the place.
Two things, Sid.
Yep.
Portland isn't on there.
No, they're not regulated by the PUC.
And Yarmouth. The surcharge for future capital. I thought that was something that can't be done.
Well, you can if you've taken out adequate bonds and expended them to have something to amortize against. That's something they're planning to do, they haven't done yet.
Well,
Meaning you've exhausted your ways of funding your.
no, one of the things that we talked about before long ago was that you can depreciate your equipment, your infrastructure, if you've got enough in the ground that's new enough that can be depreciated. So some of these guys have enough newer stuff in the ground, they can depreciate it, but then they can save money based on that depreciation schedule towards the next replacement. We don't have such thing because we're going slow enough that we don't have enough infrastructure in the ground to
A
depreciate.
few places
Excuse
do.
me, depreciate for what?
No, if you put $2 million in the ground, you should be able to depreciate that over 20 years. So.
Yeah, but I mean, are you talking about, are you paying taxes?
No, just a value that can be replaced with a fund to replace that value. It's just a rule that they have.
And you can increase your rates to cover that.
Because because the difference between what it's worth now
Without
and what
having
it's
to go
worth
through
later.
PUC and go through the
Yeah.
whole.
That will be
just
something
notify
we'll look at in the
customers,
future
they just
potentially.
automatically implement it.
I don't think
That's
we'll
the
ever
thing.
be able to do that as long as we're
Right.
going so slow. But if we start accelerating our,
Then
then we'll start having a value that's building up that we can start using reserve money to offset the loss in value every year.
Okay, one thing, just to move this along, again, what's on the horizon, will federal money be available for replacement of infrastructure?
Right.
I just got something today from the drinking water program. The last wave of, it's very confusing and hard to keep track of.
Sure.
And it's, none of it's really settled out yet. But one thing that did come down the pipe today, the drinking water program, the state got $997 million from the stimulus package that was approved back when Biden first took office. Remember, there was a big, there's a big thing that went through. There's a new one now that's kind of going through Congress. But the first one that got passed, $997 million came to the state. Governor Mills authorized $25 million of that to be used for replacement of water infrastructure. A very, very small percentage.
And the rest is going somewhere else, right?
Well, but that's going to be administered over the next 4 years through the main drinking water program under their SRF loan
That sounds like
program.
nothing.
So if you
Compared
apply for SRF funding, that money, and you're prioritized, you will that money will be put into the SRF pot and used for principal forgiveness.
So you don't have to wonder how Mills is able to balance the budget and put money in the rainy day fund. When it's money that's supposed to go to drinking
With
water,
that,
infrastructure,
yeah.
they're using it for a lot of other things besides drinking water.
Yeah,
So,
obvious,
I mean,
yeah.
it is what it is.
25 million,
That's
drop
what
in the
came down.
bucket.
Literally.
No pun intended, drop in the bucket.
Not when you're looking at what we're talking about doing over
That's
the course of
insane.
5 to 6 years, you know?
But
25 million.
there's stuff going on the sewer side of things, but that's for another day. But there currently is, as you know, a lot of negotiation going on for this latest round, and what that's going to do. Looks like a lot of that's going to be used for replacement of bridges and roads.
Yeah.
And there is some that's going to be allocated for water replacement, but that's going to be a lot of the issues around lead, lead in the water, lead pipes, which
We may have missed our opportunity if the first stimulus had the water pipe replacement money in it. That's not gonna be in the second stimulus. It's
But
already-
like Sid said, it's lead, right, pretty much?
Yeah, there's a lot of companies, a lot of communities have lead pipe in the ground.
Right.
It's actually feeding customers.
If the water district bonds, could the sewer district still bond? So if we need to bond.
Two
for
separate
that,
districts,
Two
yeah.
separate, okay.
Two separate companies.
Two separate companies, okay.
Now, I'm gonna be the wet blanket, and I make no apologies for it. But, you know, I'm concerned about future projects we might have coming up above and beyond replacing pipe. We've got a long history of not bonding for pipe replacement. And if you look at our bond schedule, I think it's naive to think that in the next 15 years, we're not gonna be taking out any bonds and we're gonna be debt-free. There are things coming up that are going to require some bonding and maintaining some of our bonding capacity. And I just listed a few things. There's a lot of things on here that could happen. I don't have a crystal ball that far out, but as we know, we eventually want an equipment garage, a water meter replacement. You should replace your water meters every 20 years. We're currently 10 years into our current water meters we have. That's probably gonna be a $1.5 to $2 million project when that comes along. In-lake water treatment, you know, we did an alum treatment a couple of years ago. We might need another one. We just, there's always something coming up in terms of the water treatment program. A filtration plant, are we going to lose our filtration waiver? If we do, we're going to be scrambling for funding any treatment plant upgrades.
So-
The UV plant was built back in 2011, but that's going to need some periodic upgrades, updates. You know, we've got our water tanks, there's
Now, one question I had to that, and maybe Tanya's gonna help us with this, because I know the city, they have and the Maine Municipal has a formula that says cities can borrow, based on their income, taxes and all that, they have a ceiling. Every city's got their own ceiling. Now, Auburn's ceiling is something like $30 million, or maybe more. But no, that they get total indebtedness.
Okay.
Something like that. And the idea, we tried to keep it down under 10, now we got the high school, that's gonna bring it up. But there's that ceiling based on MMA and what they say. Is there something for water districts that says, you know, because you talked about worrying that we couldn't do these things if we bonded for pipe replacement. Well, my question would be,
Is there a
okay,
ceiling?
what is the percentage of our income that can be bonded?
Good point.
Can we borrow 30 million and be okay? Can we owe 40 million and be okay based on, is there any formula there somewhere? I know there is for cities,
If I asked for industry standards,
not industry standards, I mean MMA or somebody should
oh, I
have
don't
it.
know, I don't know
No.
what Auburn Water District's
Business
doing. I have no
practice.
idea.
I mean, you apply for these bonds, they must,
They're gonna rank us, right?
Right.
Decide that, you know, you guys got a
okay,
good
you
operation.
guys already have too high.
Yeah.
Our current bonded indebtedness, if you take our current liabilities against our bonded, isn't it like, what was it, 24 or 25% right
Yeah,
now?
right there.
Right. And I know talking to our previous, remember Greg Layton who was here, wasn't he saying it was around a,
40.
yeah, you don't want to be too close to that threshold.
We got 270,000 going away after the end of this year.
Yeah,
In debt service,
That's right.
yeah.
so you can add that to this.
So we could conceivably add 2 million without changing anything, without changing our percentage at
Right,
all.
absolutely. Close, yeah, because that's 180,000,
For-
yeah,
Close enough for
yeah.
macro.
Actually address that issue right there, Andy, the third point, but just some of the discussion points and what I consider to be key takeaways and recommendations. And this is staff's recommendation and feelings on this. In general, and how we've done it up until now is bonding is appropriate, and we've used them for immediate one-time needs when cash on hand can't be maintained to run operations. Based on our history of operations, we'll most likely need to take out some bonds in the future, as I just mentioned, for some one-time projects. If we, I've said this quite a few times, if we retire our current bonded debt over the next 14 years, I think that will put us in a better long-term financial position. We do have a long history of not bonding for pipe replacement, and it really was, I think it's been a long-term strategy up until now to put us in the position we're in, where we can kind of see over the horizon and see that we will be in a pretty good financial position once these bonds drop off. If we are forced to bond the cost of a filter plant, that would create a financial hardship on the district if we already have a lot of significant bonded debt for pipe replacement, if we decide to bond now, you can see from this chart in the outlying years, it does catch up with it. And I do have here, you know, our current bonded debt is around 23%. Healthy ratio by industry standards is anything under 50.
Wow. That's good.
And one thing, you know, if, the next to last point, if we do choose to fund pipe replacement with cash on hand, we can accelerate or decelerate it based upon our ability to fund it. It can be a scheduled activity that we control. However, if we choose to bond it, then you're on that payment schedule.
Yeah, you have to spend.
And I guess my final recommendation take on that is we're in a very strange time right now. With all the federal government stimulus that could or could not be coming, I just think it would be wise to wait until we have more answers. I don't know how long it's gonna take for all these stimulus plans to shake out. If there's all of a sudden a big pot of money for infrastructure replacement, yes, I mean, I'm doing my best to stay on top of it, see where the votes are, see where this money is, where it's going, how we can access it. I think we really need those answers before we do anything.
Well, because my feeling is if we start borrowing and then something comes up, that year we don't have to borrow the money, it's given to us.
But availability, we may also be looked at, they may say, how much have you bonded lately, and then you may get less money
No,
because of that.
no, not because of that. In fact, we get more if we're bonding. If we're paying out of cash, well, we're good, we've been paying out of cash for 40 years. Oh, then you're all set. We'll
Yeah,
go
right.
give this person.
We'll go give it to that guy that's
Believe me,
upside
trust me,
down.
people that are in debt are the banker's friend usually. But, no, I don't think that's a concern.
Well, the thought is if you're going to bond, the reason would be to increase the schedule.
Right.
One, okay?
That's the whole reason.
The whole reason would be to increase the schedule. You're gonna have more cash on hand, so if something does happen, you're gonna end up having more cash.
What time
Deal
to
with
react.
that,
Yeah.
deal with that issue, unless you pick the hybrid,
Right.
use some cash and some. My concern is where it costs so much more to go over that threshold of 2 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that's
substantial.
just a while.
It's kind of like going 55 miles an hour, you know, in your car, and man, I want to get there a little faster, so I'm going to go 80, and holy smokes,
Well,
your mileage
right.
drops to.
And and my point there is that no matter how we do it, out of cash or not, or we just don't do that third mile, we just do the 2 miles and say, it costs that, unless we want to increase our staff and equipment and capabilities, that's what it costs. So when it comes to comparing, if we go to 3 miles, cash bonding, it's still the same argument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter, it could be $2 million.
Right.
So it's really,
Doesn't matter. We'll do
it
the
generates a
comparison.
third.
I would keep it at 2 miles.
Whether we even want to go that extra mile because it's so expensive right
Right.
now, I would say, well, if we think it's going to go back down, maybe we don't give them what they want and let them gouge us for an extra double what it would be. But if we can find somebody to work with us, maybe we'll find somebody that will work partly with us. I don't know.
All right.
If we're going to clearly commit to $1 million a year or an extra mile every year, we go to somebody and say, we're committed for the next 5 years to do another mile every year. Are you on board to help us out? Or are you gonna
Find
charge
somebody
me
to work a deal with them.
You're gonna charge me that extra money because you can right now? Or do you want a 5-year contract that says, you're gonna do this for the next 5 years, and we'll make sure you're my guy, what are you gonna do for us? Well, no, I'm still gonna gouge you $1 million. So then, goodbye,
All right,
we'll wait till we'll find somebody else that'll work with us on a 5-year deal.
Yeah, it's a
I don't
good
know,
position to
there's
be in
options.
because
Right,
we can always think of default back that we're just gonna do $2 million a year,
because it's too
2
expensive.
miles a year, and that's it.
I don't want us to do it just because
Right.
right now, but we need to get to that accelerated somehow, some way. Because I don't think that 30 years from now, we're gonna be happy with what we've got left.
No, because all
In the
that
ground,
cast iron
back.
with the cement in the camp.
At 2 miles a year, that's 60 miles. And that's just the worst of the worst, that's nothing else.
That's it, right.
You know, we got, how many miles we got this really should be replaced?
Should be.
Yeah, should be.
13 got the cast, we've got 50 of
So
these.
that's
The cement
63.
cast, yeah.
that's 63 miles an hour. If we dedicated 2 miles a year for the next 30 years, we might get rid of that, but we know we can't because other things
It's gonna
come up.
take
This
30
road's
years.
getting open, we gotta
Yeah.
replace it, this happens, we can't replace a full 2 miles of bad pipe every year. It just isn't feasible.
The thing about the cast iron cement line is they put that in for several generations. I mean, they put that in anywhere from like the 1930s all the way up into the 1960s. So there's some cement line cast iron that's certainly a lot worse than other cement line cast iron.
I'm sure you're right.
And then there's original cast iron that we cement lined. So we took pipe like that, the bigger diameter stuff, we corded out and then we cement lined it. So there's variations of that too. Again, not all cement line cast iron is horrible. So you say, is it all, you have to get it out now? Not all of it, but a good percentage of it. The stuff that we
You have it
reline.
mapped out where, like,
Oh, we've
the,
got it all mapped.
Oh, yeah.
where, like, this is bad, this is
Yep.
not so good,
We're
this
in the middle of a
is.
study too.
And
that's gonna be
we
more
got that
precise,
study,
right?
and I'm hoping to have some of that for next week as well.
So it'll
That'd
be
be
more
great,
precise,
yeah.
this is where it is, this is where the priority should be.
Well, this has been very helpful for me. Because now I really understand, the money costs us 4.6%, 4.685%. That's what the cost of the money is.
Oh, and the cost of replacing pipe, does that include asphalt?
Everything.
Yeah, we're talking
Yes.
another million.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wanted to check, yeah.
That was one of the things that made that double, because we're assuming that we're gonna go into new territory and open a road that doesn't need to be
Exactly.
open.
Well,
So
and
we're
that's
gonna-
Because
where-
replacing what we are now, we can work with the city in what they're doing, so we can take
With the
advantage
2
of
miles,
our
right.
structure.
Conceivably, even though it doesn't always seem to work out,
No.
the city doesn't always, well, whatever.
But
But
the idea
The
is that,
potential is always there.
the potential to work together, as is some of this money that's coming in, that we're talking about doing additional roads. That's being thrown out there. So as you're doing your project, I mean, the potential, that's why I think it's, if all of a sudden we knew that there's all these other roads opening up, we want to have a facility in place to be able to
Yeah, 'cause you
take
guys got a
advantage
bunch
of
of
it.
money to
Because it's gonna
spend,
cost
yeah.
us, then it maybe won't cost us 200%, maybe it only costs us 100% because the city's already,
Right.
is already paying for the
if they use
paving
some
and
of their
then,
stimulus money to fix roads,
yeah,
accelerate their road
or
repairs.
take
Yeah.
stuff that was in CIP, that was budgeted in CIP, that now this funny money coming in says, well, you can spend it on this, well, now we have that CIP money that we don't have to borrow, or we can take and put this,
Right.
that's kind of what's going on.
I think it's nice to have this,
15 million coming in,
have this program shovel ready, you know?
right, 7.5 and 7.5.
Well, that's why having a bond discussion and having shovel ready, because if that happened,
Yeah,
and we had a choice, well, we can, we'll just go at our own pace. What are we gonna do? We
Right.
don't have enough cash.
right,
And we,
exactly.
then we gotta do an immediate pricing, rate increase of 15% to go to 3 miles on
Right.
whatever. And
So
again,
to
other-
me, my initial impression on this is we'd be foolish not to bond money in year one at this point, given everything that's going on, so we would have the ability to move. And it's, the $2 million bond, we're gonna actually pay less in debt service on a $2 million bond today than we are next year because we're taking off $268,000. So our actual debt service is gonna go down. If I'm,
Yeah, and if we don't
And
use that
just
money for
doing the numbers
capital
on-
improvements, we'll be in really good shape. But if we use that money for capital, then we're no better off than we were. And that's what we have to be careful of. The idea of the borrowing a couple of years' worth of capital improvements and putting the money in the bank,
Yeah.
we're not increasing our rate at all.
right,
But we just have that money in the bank for future use.
yeah, put it in
And
a
that's,
fund.
okay, that's fine, but
Fund.
we're not accelerating anything. And if we want to accelerate, then we gotta spend that money that's in the cash or raise rates. Or
Well,
just
I'm
set
not-
a fund.
Stipulations too, though, if when you're bonding it, it has to be spent, right?
Right.
Well, no, because you are gonna spend it, but
Well,
you're
this
taking-
$2
you're taking
$2
the
million
money-
bond is gonna do 3 miles.
Yeah, and then you're gonna take the money that would normally would have taken out of cash and you put it over here, so it's theoretically, yeah, we're not spending the
Okay,
bond, but we are,
I understand,
okay?
yeah, yeah.
We are spending the bond money over here, but we're, and that's what you're talking about, the paperwork. So I'm sure it's tougher for you guys too, because now you got money coming in on a bond that
I
has to be
would
spent for
assume we
infrastructure.
would do something and create a fund balance of some sort.
Right, some sort of a capital
Fund balance that we put in for the long-term, like, I see this as being able to do a number of things and put us in really good shape for, if we put a fund balance in place, that we do have an emergency coming up in the future.
Well, you know, looking at I did my little head scratch here, but I had come up with at the end of year 3, if we wanted to say borrow $6 million, you'd still have, like, in that fund balance you're talking about, $2.4 million,
Yeah.
just laying there.
Yeah,
You could use it for, and your debt service is $360,000 a year. So you could keep that in there theoretically and still be in good shape if you have this available for the future if you stopped at 3 years. That's owing $6 million. So if we did it the way you're talking, we'd only owe only $180,000 a year in debt service for $2 million, I mean, only a year.
You're at what, 174 or something like that?
So
Now?
you would have a lot. You'd have $2 million left on hand that you could just, you know.
Do we have to follow a scenario specifically here, or could we do a bond for $1 million or $2 million for just 1 year,
yeah,
and then see what happens?
yeah.
The scenarios,
And what do you think on that, Sid?
on the sheet it says scenarios.
That
one,
sounds okay
scenarios
with
two.
potential. What, say again, Sid? What
Well,
if
that's,
we were just
that's
follow-
what we've shown in scenarios number 1 and number 2.
You know, Bob,
Yeah,
to your
okay.
point, I think that's a great thought, that we would use a scenario like number 2, which is the do it 2 years in a row. Bonding for 2 years in a row? Was that scenario
3.
2?
Yeah, well, it says two.
Yeah,
It
that was
says
the third
two.
one.
Scenario
Add a
3.
number.
Yeah.
Add a
Yeah,
number.
so if we did that, and then we saw what our cash position is, and we owe this $2 million, I know we owe $2 million, but we see what our cash position is going forward, see what's the next step. Because I've never been one to say, let's jump into this with both feet.
I'm not saying that we jump into it either.
But that
I
might be
think
one way
this
to
is
do it.
preparation.
Because look
Good
at
point.
this, look at this.
We
don't-
need to prepare
Right.
and know what we're going to do if certain circumstances,
Right.
like
So-
if the city opens up 5 miles of road and there's 4 of it has cast iron in there, we are insane if we don't replace that cast iron.
Right.
We're insane. It's gonna cost us half as much as if we
Right.
wait till they pave it over and then we dig it up. I mean,
Absolutely.
For the
That's-
asphalt.
so
Yeah.
we have to be prepared to be able to move on something like that. That's where and it's
Yeah.
not 15% a year. The rates are 5% a
Yeah.
year.
And when you look at scenario 2 and 3, both of them aren't a required rate increase until 2040. But I'm not recommending we wait till 2040, so I wouldn't want to sit there and say, well, no, we don't need a rate increase. I think we will still have rate increases, but we have a little bit reasonable ones
And
every
this is
3 or 4
assuming
years.
that there's no growth in customer base either. That
That's
this-
right. But what if we did that and we said, well, we're gonna go up 5% in 3 years? Because we should, we have operational costs. Now, that's an easy one for people to take.
Yes.
Not 15% all at once, and plus what it costs for the fire protection services the city gets
On
hit
top,
on.
yes.
So we're going gradually 4 or 5% increase. It's not 15 every 3 years. And our history shows every 3 to 4 years, we're going up 15%.
Right.
That's a
the
big
last
hit for
10
both the
years.
city and for the ratepayer. 5% every 3 years would be much better.
Much
So
more.
what if we did that? Every 3 years, 5%?
And that's 15% only on the water side. We also gonna have the sewer side.
They
It's
can
gonna
do their
have to
own
be-
thing, but
You're gonna that too.
Right.
That's gonna have to be an
Because that-
rate at some
that
point in
tank
time.
is a
So
massive-
it's not a standalone thing. We got water and we got sewer.
So I guess we have the opportunity to make sure our cash position is never an issue, that we can increase to 3 miles really quite easily, once it becomes reasonable to spend that extra mile, because really, I don't want to pay double just because.
No, I
But I
think
don't want
that's
to wait too
crazy.
long either. If that's what it costs, that's what it costs, but I'm willing to hold off on the extra mile, because I don't want to get gouged. But if that's how things pan out in the next 12 months, interest goes up, inflation
Yeah.
goes up, and that's what it is what it is.
Yeah.
Either we hire more
I
people to do
think-
in-house work, or we pay their price.
I think we have to prepare. We have to be ready, and this is what this is, that we know if the opportunity, I don't think we should pay twice as much for an extra mile. That doesn't make any sense. But if it's not gonna cost us twice as much and we can replace old pipe, then we should. So we have to have the ability in place to be able to do that, because maybe we only bond 1 mile, $1 million, which is 2 miles, and then they open up 2 miles worth of road and we have the extra cash on hand, and we decide that, all right,
Do it.
one time, let's spend the cash, boom, we got the one
Well, you have to
thing.
remember, every year we're getting $1 million
Well,
from
we
the
might only
budget.
do it 1 year, though.
But right,
And we still have more cash on hand, we got operations coming in.
but you're gonna have, like, for the second year, you have $2 million on hand, because you get the $1 million that you didn't
Right.
spend this year, and then next year, boom, the budget gives us another $1 million.
Right,
But we're gonna spend that, so
On pipe,
we'll have that extra cushion of $1 million.
Yeah.
for-
The one thing I'd recommend doing, given the information that came out today, I think we should apply for And it's due this October, is next year's SRF funding. We should apply for that, because that principal forgiveness that's gonna be boosted into that, I think is.
But that's the high,
The 1%
high,
is
high
not gonna
rate.
be there forever either.
But if you're getting, depending upon the
Yeah, it's
principal,
not gonna be there
if
for a
it's got principal
No.
forgiveness added to it, then that should eat up any admin fee that you're having to pay.
Right, they have a
for your
huge
bond.
admin fee up to 20-something%, but supposedly, they don't guarantee it, but there's a chance that they'll actually forgive some of the debt. But we don't know.
Right.
But it could end up being only half
I'll
of that.
take
I
the
think-
5%.
I think we should apply for that SRF.
I'll take the 4.8%.
If you apply for it and they award it, and you find out it's 50% principal forgiveness, then you take it. If you find out it's only 10%, you say,
Right.
okay, well,
They
we
tell you
passed.
up front,
We're gonna
right?
bond it.
Do they
They'll
tell
tell
you
you
up
when
front?
you receive it, what you're gonna get.
Oh, so
And
they
you
tell
have
us
the
up front.
Yeah,
opportunity-
so there'd be
It
enough
depends
time to
on-
apply.
It depends on your economic condition, you know,
Right.
the.
Right, if you're doing good, we're not gonna help you. If you're doing crap,
Well, it has
we're
nothing to
gonna
do
bail
with the
you out.
district, it has a lot to do with the community,
Right.
the
Oh.
standings of the
Well, Auburn's
community,
not gonna win that battle.
That sounds something to look
Let's
at.
face
It's
it, yeah.
October, we should look at that?
median household income.
It's
Right,
right.
Good.
Yeah, it's
So we
based
should,
upon-
we
yeah.
should plan on that.
Sid, will you add in an explanation
Yeah.
onto the agenda,
Yeah.
talk, and give us a breakdown of what that you're talking about, that you want to apply to for
Right,
October?
but again, a poorer community is gonna get that, we're not, probably not gonna qualify for.
Well, you don't know that.
I know.
No, we got a pretty high
Auburn's not a
poverty
rich
rate.
community.
We got a very high
Median household
poverty rate.
This is
income,
true.
it's not, I think it's only,
Last time I
Let's
got
see,
it,
it's 45,000.
had to
Yeah,
pay for
it
its
is higher than the
income
ones that seem
survey
to
of the
get all the money
community,
though.
which is.
Just
still,
tell you that.
it is a
Cost us
competitive
10 grand.
process. And I think there is gonna be a lot of applications for it, but I think we should
Came in
do
and
it.
surveyed it.
I think so too, if we can get,
Got the income.
so, all right,
So
anybody
that's all I
else?
had.
Now, a lot of things, like I
Yes,
said,
yes.
that we talked about, we went with $1 million, because last year, in our current budget, we budgeted 600,000 for 2 miles of pipe. But we're assuming, because of what's going on,
Yeah,
that we're gonna have to budget for next year $1 million for the same
Yeah,
2 miles.
yep.
Now, can that happen? We don't know, but, so that could reduce what it costs. And we're also assuming that we're gonna have to pay double the outside agency. So that's the other $1 million for the third mile. That could also change.
Yeah, again,
But the
I mean,
idea
this
here
goes
was just to
great right now.
compare
Yes.
bonding to
Yeah,
cash.
it was a
bonding to
great
cash.
comparison, I
That's
think.
all it
Yes.
is.
I
I
want
got
that
it
job.
really, I understand, this was, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now I understand how that worked, so, good.
It looks like
Thank
some sort of a hybrid maybe, or some sort of a thing that makes sense to me.
We
but-
just have to be prepared.
Yeah, and I just don't see how we can't take advantage of it. We just, I think we just can't
Well,
not
especially-
take advantage of the low interest rate right now.
Right.
And that program is saying if they're offering a pretty high, you know, if that will give us a 50% reduction in what we owe or something, we might as well apply for it. They say it's only 10%, we don't do it, but if it's high, these trying times, maybe we will get a deal.
Yeah. I am in favor of
Well, thank
all
you,
of,
Sid,
I
for
am in
everything.
favor.
Are you guys
I am-
adjourning? You guys adjourning?
Yeah.
Thank you,
We-
Tanya.
Move to
Yeah.
adjourn?
Thank you for, I know there's a lot of work
to
involved in
adjourn?
putting this together.
Yes, second.
Second.
Yeah, that was a lot
All in
of
favor?
All in
work.
favor of
Thank you, sir.
adjourning?
Well, no, we were workshop, we're done.
Thank you, Mike.